What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Creatives on Business. My name is Henry Marsh, and it is my job to chat to all of the amazing creative people out there in the world on how they run their respective creative businesses. With me today, all the way from Pretoria, Snor City, is the old mayor of Pretoria, if I can put it that way. That's what we used to call the man. Adriaan Louw, what's happening, meneer?
Oh, good and yourself.
Good. Thanks for joining the show today in our wonderfully busy lockdown coronavirus season.
Yeah, I know, 100%. This is obviously my lockdown look. I don't know if hopefully no one will see my face, but fun fact though, I mean, you mentioned the mayor. Pretoria currently doesn't have a mayor.
Really?
The mayor actually resigned. Yeah, he resigned. And then there's this weird sort of legislative issue where we have to now elect a mayor in this awkward time. So, yeah, so I might actually just assume the position.
I was about to say, so I feel like there's a job opening here for you.
100%.
So for the party people out there who don't know, who is Adriaan Louw? What is it that you currently do with your life?
Well, how much time do you have?
Yeah, I try to keep the episodes under an hour, so you've got a whole hour.
Okay, so we can cover the bio. No, I think it's probably a loaded question, but I've been called a dabbler of sorts. I'm an architect by profession, a self-taught sort of photographer, and then unofficial tour guide to Pretoria. So there's a lot of stuff locked in there, but I like to try many things. I can phrase it as such.
We've always connected really, really well, and I always try to put it out into the world, you know, my little disclaimer that most of the people that I have conversations with on the show are people I actually know personally. And you and I met a couple of years ago, and I think we're actually very similar in a lot of manners. We think about things in very similar ways and do a lot of different things in similar ways, except I don't brew as much beer or as much I don't bake as much bread as you do.
It's part of the dabbling. I mean, I've actually this week started making yogurt. So I mean, there's really no stop. Yeah, there's no end.
I think one of the coolest stories I remember of you actually telling me, and I think this is one of the cool things about, and one of the reasons why I actually wanted you on the show as well, is your entrepreneurial spirit. You told me the story about how you and your wife just one week decided to make jaffles at a market, and you guys rocked up, made jaffles the whole entire day long, and then didn't make a hell of a lot of money and just spent the money on buying alcohol afterwards, which was great. But you did it because you're good.
Which is a perfectly sustainable business model.
Yeah.
I mean, so no, we did do that. I actually forgot about that. But and it was pretty insane. I mean, at some point this was with a previous business partner, which we started this venture, but we actually sold the jaffles at Hazel Food Market. And I mean, yes. And at South Towns Market. I mean, I think some nights we were selling like over 120 jaffles. And I mean, if you've ever made a jaffle, it's sort of fairly sort of abrasive, intensive effort kind of thing. You really dream about it
afterwards. I think you and I have different dreams then as well.
Clearly.
Have you always had this entrepreneurial spirit? Is this something that you just started off like from school days? You were just selling things.
I think I'll give you like a quick story. So the first thing is obviously, I think from my mother's side, she has this intense fear that I don't finish things. Even from a very small age, she sort of tried to coerce me into finishing things, and I really get bored quickly. So it was a sort of a difficult kind of struggle. But I remember my primary school had this thing they called Entrepreneur Day or whatever, where you're supposed to like come up with some sort of art or thing or whatever, and then try and sell that. And then they make you pay like a fee for the table. Let's say it was $10 back then. You have to pay this fee for the table. And I just thought to myself, but why am I paying this? I mean, this isn't like, why is there this sort of legislation? I've got this product which I made from these old curtain hooks, these big ones, not the ones you get now. And if you bend it open, you could make like a little crossbow. So I like recovered this sort of glass jar full of this from my grandmother's place. And then I made these crossbows and I was selling them like from the first period. So by the time the actual Entrepreneur Day started, I was sold out. And then it came out like Adriaan didn't pay the table fee or whatever. I'm like, but I didn't use the market. I used the unofficial market. I mean, why is this sort of legislated? I don't understand. So I think there's been a bit of a yeah, let's say there's a trend.
Entrepreneurial spirit from Klein Adriaan. How old were
Yeah.
you when you were doing this?
This is probably like standard one. Yeah. Primary school. So it's definitely not.
Like
Yeah.
9 years old.
Yeah,
9 years old, 10 years
yeah,
old.
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, so for the party people out there on the internet, you're an architect by trade, and that's what you sort of practice.
Qualified professional architect. Yeah,
That's your day job.
That's my day job. Yeah. Well, actually, I've got once again these many facets of my life, but I've got a day job where I manage and run the sort of aesthetic plan approval process for a big residential estate in Pretoria. Then I also do my own private architecture on the side of that. There's sort of a convenient agreement there. And then, whatever else. I've got a blog with my wife, a travel blog, which we sort of do whatever we want on. It's not really highly intense. And then there was a bit of, we actually met through photography. There's no disputing that. So there's that part. And it's weird in your life how as you go from one phase to the next, your passions flare up and they die down. And when I was big into photography, the architecture was actually quite subdued. Well, there wasn't a lot going on. So I was working for government for a stretch in my life as well. I always call it my in-service training years. So I did that for about 4 years, which was terrible. But then I had this fantastic opportunity to meet a lot of people through photography. I was traveling the country a lot. I got access to places which you would never get access to if you're a civilian. So I think it all sort of slots in, it all pans out.
Why architecture? Why did you go into architecture originally?
Yeah, that's also a fun question. From a young age, I was sort of dismantling stuff and taking stuff apart, and sort of there was a definite. My dad's very, very sort of. He's got an aptitude for fixing stuff or putting stuff together. Sort of almost like an industrial designer / engineer kind of thing. He's in the education business, practical education. So I think there was this sort of natural thing towards something technical, and it was always engineering. I should have, I would have probably become an engineer if my parents didn't send me for those sort of tests, aptitude tests. And the guy, like he said, listen, if you put Adriaan into engineering, you're going to break his spirit. And I think he was probably very right, because sometimes even architecture has too much rules for me. That's why I enjoyed photography. There's no rules. Just do what you want. You got a product very quickly. You got a result sort of almost instantly. Whereas with architecture, it's definitely a long game. But it's after those tests, I went to go work for my uncle for a week. This was sort of standard 9. So it was a fairly late career change. So I was definitely not one of those, I was drawing stuff in my book from grade 1. I wasn't drawing. I still can't actually draw properly. It's the biggest disgrace. It's actually, I compensate by all other sort of means to produce amazing work, but by not drawing. I can't write beautifully. Like most architects have amazing handwriting. Like I should have become a doctor in that sense. So I really don't think there was an amazing sort of story of why I got into it. I just think the balance between what you do and your sort of skill set made sense to me. And if you really don't know what you want to do, go study architecture for a year, because it gives you such a weird range of skills. I've been exposed to designing websites, to graphic design, to landscape design, to interior design. It's also, I use this quote, I'll paraphrase, but it says something, it's at the introduction of a documentary. It says something in the lines of, from the hospital where you were born in, to the school where you attend, the markets where you do your shopping, the cinema or theater where you go for entertainment, every aspect of your life is actually influenced by an architect.
Yeah.
And it's, that sounds a bit like a power trip, but that's not the thing. I just think it's an amazing field which is so diverse, and it teaches you to question stuff. Like you question how people think, you question how people move. And even when we did the jaffle thing at the markets, like there's this funny thing where the one day the lady who ran the market put us in this awkward corner, So there would be no foot traffic. Like no one would walk past your stall. It was like really like the spot where you put the awkward people like us. And I sort of looked at the situation, and my business partner at that point was also an architect. And I was like, let's just take that bench. So we fetched this bench. It's like a loose bench. And we just moved it strategically. So people like psychologically had to walk around the bench. And they're actually forced to then pass those 2 or 3 stalls in this tight corner. All of a sudden, everything changed. Like it made sense. And it's such a small, stupid thing. But if you think about it, if you don't have the skill to assess that scenario, you won't find the solution. And I think, like I said, I bore quite easily, but I think there's like 2 things in my life which I can't figure out to an extent where I get bored of it. And the one is architecture and the other one's my wife. So I mean, those 2 will probably be with me infinitely.
Does she know this? Does she know she has this power trip over you?
I'm sure she does. I think it's that's maybe also a kind of a little bit of relationship advice. I think a man should never think that he actually has his wife figured out, and I think a woman should never be able to fully tame her husband. Like, so you, like, just when you start behaving, you have to do a little bit something, like she just gets cross again, you know, and then she knows, oh, damn it, she hasn't domesticated you entirely yet. Because I think the moment a woman does that, they'll probably get bored and then cause trouble. So, yeah, there's a bit of a sort of a natural tension there, which I think is healthy.
Coming back to the architecture, you mentioned earlier that you guys like to travel, and I know that you guys like to travel quite a lot. Do you find yourself, when you travel overseas, even locally, that you're analyzing buildings, taking a look at how things were designed in a specific era?
Dude, it's like a disease. They say there's only 2 people who notice ceilings: prostitutes and architects. So it's like my wife is, she knows. I mean, we travel a lot. We've been traveling together for the best part of 10 years, and locally and internationally. And I mean, we've been fortunate. We've seen a lot of places together, but it's really like it gets ridiculous to the extent where some days she would just say, okay, today I'm going to take a personal day. You go do your pilgrimages, go run wherever, and do whatever you need to do to see that building that you think is special. So, yeah, we plan trips around places that I want to see. So it's rough.
Do you have a bucket list of like specific buildings that you want to like go and take a look at?
Yeah, I'm weird in that sense where I think I put everything sort of against its own merits. So I don't have a very rigid list. There's sort of this informal kind of idea of places that we still have to get to, which is pretty much everywhere. But well, I mean, we were supposed to go see Barcelona later this year and London, which I was very excited for. But obviously that's falling through.
Yeah, for the people out there who don't know, we're busy recording this on the 12th of May in the middle of our wonderful coronavirus season that we find ourselves in. And it's actually, this is a good segue into something I've been wanting to discuss with you, because again, you and I have very similar outlooks in life. You posted something on the internet quite recently about people's mindsets about the current coronavirus outbreak that's busy taking place. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah, I think that's a whole can of worms on its own. And I think, I mean, let's not be insensitive towards the immense kind of load this is putting on a lot of people. I'm very fortunate. My work carries on to some extent. I also think that, once again, if you've survived, I don't know if you have friends in architecture, but if you survived the master's degree in architecture, your mind is fairly rigid in terms of surviving whatever. So for myself, I can cope with it quite well, but I do think there's a sort of a few camps in this whole thing. You get your apocalyptic kind of people, you get your conspiracy theorists, I just think a lot of people are still in denial to a big extent, and they're just focusing on returning to whatever their version of normal was. But I mean, let's be fair, it also wasn't that great. I mean, and it's amazing how people would now go off on a tangent about deaths about flu or deaths about malaria or whatever, or people being poor. All of that existed pre this. So where was your activism then? I'm of opinion this is actually a kind of a fast track into a new world order in terms of, I mean, if you think about the 8 to 5, it's been with us since the Industrial Revolution. It's due for an upgrade. Your sort of Nordic countries who are way more sophisticated have already moved on to different models. And I think if you just look at it from an architectural design, urban design kind of perspective, the moment we reduce this very rigid cycle, we can actually reduce the bulk infrastructure requirements. I mean, we would never need to expand on highways again if we reduce this sort of peak hour demand thing. So it's a very primitive concept if you think about it. So hopefully, and in a selfish way, I hope that our country manages this in a smart way, but I also hope that it just lasts long enough for us to actually change. I think it would be a great sort of pity if we just revert back to where we were.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He's studied with me, and he's an industrial engineer, and that's what he does for a living as well. I met up with him in Cape Town, and we were having dinner one night, Hudson's burger joint. It was like a Tuesday night, middle of the week. And he was saying, like, and this was before the whole coronavirus thing started. I think this was in Feb. So, coronavirus had sort of kind of really started hitting the rest of the world, but South Africa was still very much not even aware of what was taking place. And we were chatting, and he's like, we have a big problem with the way that our country, and I don't think it's just our country problem, but I think it's predominantly here because we live here. We see it every day. But he's like, we have a big problem with how buildings and things operate at the moment. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, take a look around us at the moment. It's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. All these buildings are empty, because they're all businesses. People rock up, they're there from 8 to 5, and then people go home. And the rest of the time, these buildings stand empty. So for 16 hours in a day, these buildings are standing empty. So, from an architecture point of view, I'm sure I don't know if it's the kind of thing that you've thought about, but, you're bringing it up now with this coronavirus argument about how we need to change the way that we implement our infrastructure. What do you think is like the kind of way forward? What is going to happen to, you mentioned now that we don't have to ever expand our highways. I also don't think it's the kind of thing that we need to build as many buildings and shopping malls and all these kinds of things anyway. Do you think that's clearly going to have an impact on the way that you do your job in the future?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, and you're almost playing into my hand here, because I mean, it's really the kind of concepts that I'm pondering at the moment. So in terms of, that's Cape Town where you were enjoying those lovely Hudson burgers, but Pretoria is way worse. Pretoria being the capital of South Africa, the CBD is literally comprised of government buildings. Now, if you think of your average government employee, which I've been for a stretch, you zoom into work with your car, whatever, you park in a basement, you go to the office. Best sort of scenario is you maybe buy lunch in town, and then come 4 o'clock, probably 3, you just buzz out of there and you're gone, and the city's dead. So there's a migrant working community. The CBD of Pretoria has very, very little residents, and it's. You've been on the city walks that I've done. You can see it on a weekend. It's the people who are in town is actually not necessarily the residents. The people who work there definitely don't stay there, and that makes for an unhealthy kind of setup by any measure. I think if I owned an office building, I would be panicking right now. I think in terms of a spatial, let's say spatial framework or development thing, I think we're going to break neighborhoods into smaller communities. You would find that, and it's actually funny, I'm going to try and launch a social media campaign, but if you look at what the government's saying now, you should exercise within a 5-kilometer radius. But while you're doing that, just have a look around. What can you actually find within 5 km from your house? Versus what we normally used to do, the moment you need something, you just get in your car and go somewhere far. And I think that's going to, or hopefully that's going to change. Shopping malls, once again, I'd be stressing if I owned a shopping mall, because shopping malls were struggling before this.
Mm.
And I was just chatting to my wife last night saying, I think it would be funky if shopping malls actually say, well, let's sort of repurpose this infrastructure and say, cool, all these shops already have space. We've got this thing which is sort of central to certain neighborhoods. So whatever shopping mall now starts an online platform to say you order stuff from various sets of shops, and then they deliver it to you. So all of that sort of circulation space and excessive parking space and whatever can be turned into a factory packaging kind of setup, and they just deliver it to you. I don't think we're going to buy stuff the way we used to. I hope we don't. And I think if you look at the excess and the way in which we were operating in the world, it's unnecessary. I mean, why do you need to show me so much billboards and physical stuff if you can show it to me in a digital way?
Yeah.
So I hope that this kicks us into a different trajectory.
That being said, if you look at the last couple of years, especially with the advent of e-commerce and something like Takealot in South Africa and Amazon abroad, there is more and more online sales and shopping taking place. But that being said, I've found that people are still yearning for the person-to-person human interaction. They still want to go into a shop and feel the clothes that they're buying and test out the technology that they want to buy. What do you think that's going to change?
It's going to depend on how long this drags out. I think if you, I know it's someone that you also read some of his material, but Mark Manson early into this said that he predicts kind of a fear of going out, sort of a psychological issue that we're going to develop. You're going to compare everything, or you're going to weigh everything up versus the risk of actually going out. I mean, for myself, I try and stay home as much as possible. We do shopping like once or whatever in 2 weeks. So it depends. If this drags out fairly long, I think, or long, we're going to end up saying, but, it's not worth it. Like, I mean, if you want a new MacBook, you know what it's about. You're going to research it, you're going to order it, they're going to deliver it. I mean, what do you really? So I think, I was in the shops over the weekend, unfortunately, big mistake. And it's crazy how many people are still there.
Yeah. But
the experience is weird. I mean, you're wearing this mask, you're sort of self-conscious, you have to queue to go into shops. I don't know. I think it's going to change, at least to some extent. And remember, the problem is all of those infrastructure-related things were actually depending on sort of a critical mass. And I don't think we're going to get that critical mass back. So on the one end, if it doesn't change due to psychological or let's say human behavior, it's going to change due to the economical model not being viable anymore. Over the weekend, we've tried to order from some of our local sort of places that we frequent just to try and support them. And it's crazy how it's not like some random delivery guy dropping off stuff. It's the people who run the place. It's the owners. Everyone, it's really back to the owners are involved. And we ordered the most random stuff. We ordered like literally a bag of coffee beans and some pastries from the one shop that we like. We've ordered takeaway from Koi. I mean, it's the owners and the managers and the people who are involved on ground level. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely trying times.
I wanted to chat a little bit. We were chatting earlier about your CBD missions and the different ways that we can start to implement buildings. Where did your passion for the CBD come from? It's Pretoria city proper.
Yeah, I think it's sort of it's definitely a thing that comes with the territory in terms of architecture. I studied at Tshwane University of Technology, which is on the other side of town from where I stayed. So I was forced to drive through town every day. And then the photography thing, or my passion for photography, forced me to venture into the city just due to the excitement of taking photos in areas where other people weren't taking photos at that point. And then that naturally got sort of accelerated tenfold when I started working for government, which was in town. So I got the opportunity to work for Public Works right after I studied. which was also during some sort of a recession back then. So it made sense to take the job. They were paying quite well, and I wasn't too busy. So, I mean, the time, at some point, there's a mutual friend we share that. I mean, at some point we were taking photos like before work, during lunch, and after work. It was literally, it was intense. And I think that the photos set me on a course where people started messaging me and DMing me on Instagram. We were sort of, I mean, both of us were sort of on the back end of the Instagram peak. So we got sort of a little bit of attention, but just enough to be noticed. And then that naturally developed into these walking tours, which I started in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, which was actually part of a campaign that we did. There's a well-known Pretoria architect who sort of piggybacked off design capital in Cape Town at that point. We call it Cool Capital. And then we had a discussion. He said, well, can't you do something in town? And I said, I had no budget. And we ended up doing walking tours because it was free. And then City Prop, through their creative unit, I Want to Central, phoned me up and said, listen, we like this idea. You're doing it for us now. I mean, that was 6 years ago. And I mean, we still do it. We did one in the lockdown now. We did the first virtual walking tour. And I think we had like almost 250 people participating at the same time. I think up to now it's like over 6,000 views. So it's really, and I think there's a curiosity about the city, but there's also a conservative sort of Afrikaner scared kind of thing. And the moment they see, oh no, it's fine, we can go with this guy, then it's cool. Then they go. And it's crazy how over the 6 years the minimum we've done is 4 a year. There'd never be less than 60 people. It's insane.
Yeah. I want to chat about these little business ventures that you find yourself running into. You know, so I feel like everything that you start doing and that eventually turns into some money making racket is like, it's like a passion driven thing for you. You just start. Do you just start something and see where it goes, and then all of a sudden you're making money from doing it, or how does it work? How do you just eventually start making money from all this stuff?
I think the stuff that's been the most successful was actually not about the money. Funny enough, as cliche as that might sound, yeah. So the walks were 100% pro bono, and when this big corporate approached me, I was like, okay, well, you're going to pay, and they're like, oh, well, cool. What do we pay? And I concocted a price, and they were happy, and it's sort of been carrying on. And if we go back to the OG, and I mean, there's been a lot of businesses ideas. I mean, from a young age, I've been a DJ with 0 gigs. I've had, at some point I was breeding budgies, 0 money made there. So there's been a lot of stuff that's gone south. And I think if I was probably a better business person, I would make even more money. But the most of it starts from a place of passion. And I just go with it. And then at some point, someone sort of reaps it up. I mean, I've done weird stuff. I've shot photos for Adriaans. I mean, this is a huge brand, which by some weird way, they're willing to pay me for a day to take photos in Joburg CBD. It was the weirdest thing. So maybe that sort of old cliche of follow your passion and the money will follow. I can tell you that there's not a lot of money following. It's not like I'm doing amazingly well, but I trust that it's all going to collide into one thing one day. And I mean, if it wasn't for the jaffles, then the next thing wouldn't have happened. If it wasn't for government, I would have been in town. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done the walking tours. If it wasn't for that. So all of this, in my opinion, slots into some bigger kind of scheme. And there's the story that one of these things that people share, that Steve Jobs apparently claimed that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. I'm quite comfortable with that. You know, so I grab onto things that excite me. Sometimes they make sense. Sometimes I abandon them. It's fine. It's life.
I think there's always, especially within the creative community, there's people I find that there's people who they're too often too scared to take the leap of faith and just do stuff, and like too scared to fail almost. And what I've seen with you in the very short period of time that we've known each other, which actually isn't all that short if we start to think about
Not
it.
anymore, no.
Yeah, is you just seem to have this unwavering confidence of like, do something, and if it works out, fucking great. If you don't, then who cares? Like, fucking fall onto the next thing. And I think that's one of the things I really like about you. And I wanted to segue into a conversation about success, because when I start to think about successful people, I don't think of really rich and wealthy and notorious or infamous, famous people. To me, success has always been measured by, like, if you set out to do something and you eventually get there, like that to me is success. If you set out to have a cabin in the woods and live a very lonely life and not see anybody forever and ever and ever, and you eventually get to do that, that to me is success. And I've always found that you're one of those kinds of people that you somehow, when you put your mind to something, you actually eventually get there. And to me, I would consider you to be one of those very successful kind of people. Who do you think of when you think of the word success? And do you think that that's something that you've achieved?
Firstly, absolutely no. I don't get that feeling at all. I'm glad that it looks like that from the outside. I think perhaps the disconnect between your version of me and mine is that you don't see the stuff that gets abandoned as intensely as I do. And those to me feel like big failures. But I get, in a weird way, I get the same amount of joy from, I embarked on this sourdough baking journey during this lockdown. And I got an amazing amount of joy from baking this bread. And I told my wife, I think I figured it out. I really just like creating, just for the sake of creating. And if it's the jaffles we did weren't like tacky jaffles, they were gourmet jaffles, and they were amazing. And I was proud of it. So for me, success is actually when I feel good about it. And it's weird because I do fall into that sort of trap where I really enjoy the likes and the follows and the comments and the shares. We've all been there. If you don't admit that you enjoy that, then you're still lying to yourself. So I can admit that I admit that I do enjoy that, but I must say the most satisfying is when I'm actually happy with what I've done. And I suffer from let's call it, I think they phrase it, being forever discontent. So I move the goalpost, and I don't have this big thing like I want a cabin in the woods, or I want to design the tallest building, or I want to do that. I just want to try everything and have fun along the way. So for me, I think if I can sit at the end of the day, just sit, have a sundowner, and say, it's been a good day, I'll be content. I don't achieve that a lot, and that's probably what keeps me fueled to try more stuff.
If you had to look back now, you're a couple of years older than I am, but if you had to look back at sort of Adriaan at university days, what would you say to yourself?
It's a difficult thing. There's nothing I would do over. Nothing. I don't regret anything. I don't do regrets. I don't want to change a decision, because my philosophy is that it builds on the next thing. So I would probably tell myself to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think maybe that's why we get along, because I see that aggression in your approach to things. And you are a bit younger, so I admire your seriousness in terms of embarking on certain ideas and ventures. I would just, but at the same time, if I look back, one of my best school friends actually phoned me. I think we were like 4 years into varsity. He phones me and said, yes, if I only, like, he saw one of our teachers at the university, he brought the rugby team or whatever there, and he said, no, he saw this guy again today, and he realized it was all a scam. He shouldn't have taken it so seriously. I said, exactly, I told you this in school already. So at the same time, if I look back, I would tell myself to be more aggressive and serious. But I've always been fortunate that I think I approach stuff with just the right amount of seriousness versus not caring too much. This too shall sort of figure itself out. And yeah, that's my approach. I also think I recently read a book called Essentialism, the something pursuit of less, disciplined pursuit of less. And that I read it because I thought maybe it'll help me with all this dabbling business. But what I actually realized from it is, in my life, I've always been able to, if I see something, I would sort of plot the shortest route to it. And it comes from a sort of a critical analysis place as well, to say, okay, you have to do this, but to do that, you have to do that. And then what's the shortest route there? I mean, and it ties into a thing that's called economy of scale. If you're going to shoot a photo, let's put it in a sort of analogy that you 100% get. If you're going to shoot a photo that you're going to post to Instagram, you don't have to shoot it on a full frame Hasselblad, whatever. It doesn't matter. So use the tools and the time and the skill for what the end goal is. Because otherwise you end up spending so much time on something that doesn't actually matter.
Mm.
I've been able to successfully apply that, but the problem is I apply it to everything that I find interesting.
But, so myself being a qualified industrial engineer, I, especially sort of halfway through my degree, the sort of towards the ending years of my degree, you start to apply this mindset to everything. And I don't consider myself to be, I think much in the same way that you don't consider yourself to be successful in the way that a lot of other people consider you to be successful. I feel the same about myself. But the way that I look at life is I try to optimize and efficiency drive everything in my life. There isn't, like, even the way that my office space has changed, the way that I push my desk, and it's all because of like this, this critical thinking thing that you were thinking about. And what you mentioned just now, I had a conversation literally yesterday with a friend of mine. He's a very, very talented guitar luthier. He builds guitars and fixes instruments and that kind of thing. And he was chatting to me about advice on camera equipment. He wants to sort of document what he's doing at the moment. And, he's looking at maybe buying a GoPro or buying a DSLR. And I said to him, look, before you do that, before you go out and spend a lot of money, waste a lot of money buying equipment,
use your cell phone.
Use your cell phone.
Yeah,
because
100%.
At the end of the day, you can buy the fanciest gear that you want, but if you don't actually enjoy the process of making the video or documenting, the gear is not going to help you. So use your cell phone for the first 5 or 6 times and see if you actually enjoy the process of making the videos. Then you can start to upgrade your equipment and get, better quality imagery and that kind of stuff. But use your cell phone from the beginning, because you have your cell phone. And cell phones today are fucking incredible. So it is that kind of critical thinking of using the tools at your disposal to make the things that you want to make. Because I think, again, it's very interesting that we're chatting about this, especially now during the lockdown, because my dad's very similar to you in the sense he's very DIY, very build quality driven things. And he was saying, during the lockdown, you couldn't buy any sort of supplies for wood or anything like that, and you couldn't go out and buy the specific thing that you needed to fix something else. So it also you had to train your mind. Now it's like you're sort of training your mind now to get by with a lot less and using the things at your disposal, which is cool. I wanted to actually chat with you now about the kind of thing where you do have a lot of different ideas compared to everyone else, but from your perspective, what is something that you believe that is completely crazy, or that everyone else would think is completely crazy?
I believe, well, I think for myself, I think that we're not necessarily on sort of a predetermined path. I think you can actually change, you can adapt and figure it out as you go along. I think maybe the most contradicting statement that I can put towards this question would be, I don't actually believe in being so prepared. I suck with preparing. I mean, I do those walks. We do this. I don't prepare. I can't prepare for something. It freaks me out. So I just make sure that I'm prepared to think on my feet. Mm. And then the sort of a catchphrase for that would be like, it's better being able to improvise than being prepared. So yeah, I believe it. I stick to it. It's weird. It's probably going to bite me in the ass one day. It's actually caught up to me once, and this was a fairly inconvenient time. And you weren't there. But I just sort of figured, you know what? I've literally winged every other speech or whatever in my life. So I'm just going to get up there on my wedding night and I'll figure out what I want to say to my wife when I'm there. You know? Yes. Oh, did I bomb out? It was disgraceful. I'm probably going to have to do some sort of 10-year wedding renewal vow thing just to make up for it. It was terrible. It was atrocious. But that's how I knew she's the right one.
Yeah.
Because with any other thing, I could just wing it. With her, it was like there was nothing. I was bombed. I was dead in the water. But it's, yeah, so, and that's the one time I can remember that actually didn't pan out for me. But contrary to that, if you know what you want to do, or you know your field or your content, or same with you, I mean, you have to improvise. As a photographer, you have to improvise. Stuff starts going wrong on a shoot, and all of a sudden there's no preparation for when stuff goes wrong. And I thrive on it when stuff goes wrong. I dig it. I don't know why. It's weird. Like when we're traveling, we noticed this when we started traveling for the first few trips. Like stuff would go wrong. I mean, our first overseas trip to the States, we did enough flying hours to qualify for like a small plane license. I think we flew over 100 hours on that first trip. And of those, I think it was 8 flights, we probably sat together for 4 because of delays, missing flights, jumping this. I would like chat us onto a different flight because the previous flights already left, then our suitcases would be lost. And I just love it. I love the chaos of traveling. So yeah, that's maybe if I can contribute that weirdness.
I want to ask now though, with this travel and chaos, you guys have recently had a new family member join your little duo. You have the little dog now that's joined you, Marie Antoinette.
Aptly named Marie Antoinette. Yeah, that's a big name for a small dog. Shame, she's a rescue Boston Terrier. But it's so, they always say your kids adapt to the parents. I don't know if she was this way or she just sort of adapted to us, but she's super chilled. She just hangs around on the couch, checks out. She loves eating, which sort of is a natural fit for us. The traveling thing is going to be difficult. We've taken her with on a few trips. She enjoys the car, so road trips. I mean, we literally drove back from the coast December, 16-hour car ride. We got out here, packed out the stuff, and I just wanted to pull the car into the garage, and she jumped in. She wanted to drive more. So there's no issue with road trips. But overseas, yeah, it'll probably be an issue, or we'll leave it with my parents or something.
Well, I've been hearing. I've got family in Scotland. It's an old married couple. They're both retired, and they've got a dog passport for their dog, and then they fly everywhere with the dog.
I don't know how that works from South Africa's perspective. I'm sure I'm going to mention that to the wife, and she's going to definitely figure it out. She's quite aggressive like that, so we'll see.
We were sort of chatting earlier about you bombing out with certain things. What is apart from that one experience that you've had, what is one of your favorite failures? Sort of something that you just was a complete bomb out, but you actually learned so much more from it, or it opened a door to something else?
So that's a difficult question for me because I normally reduce the failure in my mind because I've already moved on to the next thing. I think I definitely stuck around too long at government. If I could go back, that's probably one of the things I would not do it, but I would just jump ship earlier. But it has its place. I think I've learned, in every experience, I've learned a set of skills. So yeah, I don't have a favorite bomb out besides for the wedding night. Well, not the night at least, but the speech. So yeah, no, I literally I roll with the punches. I don't think I dwell enough on it to realize that it was a big failure. Maybe someone else should tell me one day.
I'll follow up this conversation with your wife someday.
Yeah, maybe. I think for me, my final year at varsity was really probably the worst year of my life. And that was the closest I've ever come to giving up on something. Given up to the extent where I just give up. With most of the other stuff, it's always been sort of a pivot into the next thing and then just let that thing die down or whatever. So no.
What is one of the best investments that you've ever made? And that doesn't necessarily have to be money-wise, just something that you feel like you've put a lot of time and effort into that really was
I think
worthwhile.
On a physical level, it's definitely been the tech. I think I owned one of the first 5 Ds in the country, which that boosted my photography. I pre-ordered with Orms back then, yeah.
Wow.
So that boosted my photography, and the photography boosted my sort of social media presence, which helped me get into other positions and sort of strategic spots. Recently, I just bought an iPad with a pencil, which has changed my life, especially now that I don't want to print everything during this period. So it's amazing to mark up stuff. More on a sort of educational level, I buy a really big amount of books. And I think for myself, I've never been able to find real life mentors. You know, any self-help guru would tell you find a mentor. I mean, that's great, but I don't know who to make that connection with. I've got a lot of people who could probably be mentors. I just don't see it that way, maybe. So I try and read a lot of. I balance it sort of between cliche self-help stuff and architectural theory, and I don't do any fiction or fun stuff. There's no light reading. You know. Not a Harry Potter fan.
So then, speaking of all these books that you buy, what's your favorite book, or is there a book that you recommend the most to people to read?
I would definitely recommend the Essentialism book. I mean, we can get the author and stuff. I'm not too good with names or dates. And then I've also got a book that's almost like a reference book at the moment, which is Tools of the Titans by Tim Ferriss. It's a pretty funky book. He's also big into like life hacking and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of quick quirks. It's almost like that kind of toilet reading. You can like read it for 5 minutes and just chuck it. Other than that, I'm reading I also read about 4 books at a time. So that's also a bit of a mission, but it makes sense in my mind. I'm reading a book called The Language of Things, which is pretty cool because at the moment you're more conscious of the kind of stuff that's around you. And also the consumerism related to it. You were mentioning where you have to improvise with the things you have at hand. And I found it such a challenge because in that last week before we went into lockdown, I was trying to make a list. Like I have to prepare. I'm very sort of goal driven. I need to prepare. What am I going to be able to do during this time? I got water. I've got this. I've got that. DIY stuff. And it ended up being a liberating kind of thing to not have everything and to not jump in your car and drive to Builders to go get something. You have to like make do with what you have. Surprisingly, a lot of stuff at my house. And we recently renovated this place and then directly after that a rental property. And so there's a lot of leftover stuff here. And we ended up making, my wife's been on my case about a few sort of DIY stuff at the house. And I mean, if you're young and you're DIY inclined, don't tell your future wife that because you end up getting so much work. We ended up making, I had some old kitchen cupboard doors and I started screwing them together. We made this big panel and we made an artwork out of old kitchen cupboard doors. And I fixed stuff with the most random other stuff. Like I'd find old light fittings and then fix something else that needed. So it becomes a sort of a creative problem solving thing, which I think is good. And I think it's healthy. I think we were way too reliant on just solving stuff with quick fixes. And that's why I did the sourdough thing, because it takes so damn long. I mean, and that's why I'm doing planted veggies, because I think there's and probably 80% of these habits will die after the lockdown, which is fine. But I think there's something to investigate about using things differently and trying to reduce this consumerist nature to something. Not with I don't want to be like too much of a hippie tree hugger. I'm just saying I think we need to reevaluate our decisions to some extent.
Adriaan, starting to wind down here. I actually can't believe we've already chatted for almost an hour. Where can the party people on the internet find you? What are your social media handles? Do you have a website?
Well, yeah, the peculiar thing is there's an unfortunate amount of Adriaan Louws. There's one who's an amazing videographer, which is so frustrating because he comes up when you Google my name. I don't know why he comes up. And then there's actually a very old or older architect as well, same name. It's terrible. So branding wise, it's a total cock up. So my on Instagram I'm just Adriaan Louw, but then my majority of my social media stuff I drive through what the name that we've created, which is local. Same name, same spelling as the surname, and then just KUL, which is sort of a wordplay on local and maybe authentic, or whichever way you want to interpret it. So I've got a architecture design company, Local Design Lab. We've got The Locals, which is the travel blog. And then if you don't find me that way, then you shouldn't be using a computer.
Okay, so my last question for you today is, if you had access to that more of a big billboard on the N1 and everyone was driving past and sitting in verkeer and they're just staring at this one billboard, what would this billboard say?
Because I believe in being concise for billboards, it would say, if you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect others to? And it's a bit of a joke in terms of people perceiving me as being arrogant. So it's, and I don't see it as arrogance. I see it as just trying to get stuff done, or sort of being assertive about getting stuff done. And I live by it. I think you have to believe in yourself. I've also found that if I don't believe in an idea, I might as well not do it. It's failed. Those are the things that fail, the ones that I doubt. And I've even seen it with other facets of my life. Like if my wife asks me something, she even knows now. If I don't say hell yeah, then it's no.
It's actually interesting that this is the thing that you bring up, because I remember, and it's weird how your mind works in this sense. I remember you, me, Alessio, maybe Lebs was there, maybe Mzizi was there, sitting at our favorite coffee shop after a session out in the city at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning. And we're busy posting photographs to Instagram when Instagram was still a legit
thing. Yeah.
I remember you guys, you would post a photograph and immediately like your own photograph. And what is up with this? Why are you liking your own photograph?
I actually remember this. You were seriously confused, though.
and it was something that you said. You said, if I don't like my own photograph, why should everyone else like it?
Well, I mean, if you don't, like, why are you posting it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't like my own stuff anymore. I think we were also trying to just create some sort of thing to screw over the algorithm of Instagram. But I do believe it. I do. And like I said earlier, I think those are the things, like, that's the place where I start approaching some level of contentness. The moment I feel happy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a passing feeling.
But I think it's an important thing to process, and it's made me look at things differently. And again, as you've just mentioned, it's not about liking your own photograph on Instagram. It's about the metaphor of actually enjoying the process and being proud of the work that you create. And I think there's so much to be said about that kind of thing.
100%.
Adriaan, I think you and I can both agree that we can probably sit here and chat for another 2 or 3 hours. So we'll definitely have to get you back onto the show at some point. But thank you so much for joining.
Let's wait for my next venture. We'll see what I'll come up with next.
The moment the lockdown drops, Adriaan's hitting the ground running with his 5.
Yeah, we'll see. If architecture fails, I'll probably start something else. Who knows?
So thanks so much for joining the show, and to everybody else out there who's been listening, who's been watching, thank you so much. I'll catch you guys on the next one.